Theo, where were you when it sank in that this was actually happening?
I was taking a nice little quiet walk by the sea, and my phone starts blowing up. And it's not news apps because I don't subscribe to news apps. It's Toby spamming the group chat.
It's me,
guys. General election happening. General election being called. I was like, yeah, all right. Jan 2025, whatever.
Shall I read the first message this morning?
What from our chat?
Yeah. This was at midday. Massive rumours of July 4th election. Government gone silent. Cabinet meeting at 4. Either reshuffle or election. But why are they denying election? I think this might be it. That was me. Were you sceptical at first?
Well, just to bring up the message that I left in response, which was,
bro,
quote, bro, promise it's defo an election this time. I can feel it. Trust me, bro. Nerd emoji, unquote.
So you didn't believe me?
No. I was just making fun. No, I wasn't really like watching it too closely the last couple of days. This does seem out of nowhere, but I guess at some point it really did have to happen, didn't it? And I think it's the right thing to do. And less than 2 months. I mean, we're smack bang right into it. I mean, I heard like on Sunday, I listened to the pod that you guys did and the FT pod. It seemed like because when Labour laid out their 6 commitments, it kind of started the election cycle, and then boom, we have a date. So we're really in it now.
Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister at 5 o'clock in the pouring rain, emerging from Downing Street, calling, despite all expectations. I think I dismissed this. Didn't I dismiss summer election rumours on the pod like last week? Anyway, despite all this, we are having a July the 4th general election. We are mere 6 weeks away from potentially a change of government. Here's the Prime Minister.
In the last 5 years, our country has fought through the most challenging times since the Second World War. As I stand here as your Prime Minister, I can't help but reflect that my first proper introduction to you was just over 4 years ago. I stood behind one of the podiums, upstairs in the building behind me. I told you that we faced a generation-defining moment, and that we as a society would not be judged by some government action, but by the small acts of kindness that we showed one another. You met that challenge, and then some. And I have never been prouder to be British.
First thing, and I think you'll agree with this, Theo, do you remember the sort of fever dream period where Rishi Sunak was the most popular politician in the country during the pandemic?
I do. I remember him being interviewed, and everyone loved him because of the furlough scheme, and he was the guy who was letting you go out to eat and subsidising your meals. How that's changed.
The most popular politician in years. And I think it probably makes sense to call back to that moment, because if you're trying to sell yourself to the public, he is now the least popular politician in the country. It probably makes sense to try and call back to the time you were popular, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit more of Sunak here.
And when I introduced the furlough scheme, I did so not because I saw a country simply in need of desperate help.
They were always going to talk about furlough.
We were. But because I saw a country whose future hung in the balance. I could be bold and trust in the tens of millions of you at home that you would rise to the moment. Or I could accept the inevitable, millions of job losses, and pick up the pieces. In truth, it was no choice at all. I have never and will never leave the people of this country to face the darkest of days alone. And you know that because you've seen it. As I did then, I will forever do everything in my power to provide you with the strongest possible protection I can. That is my promise to you. Because for so many of us, it's easy to forget the scale of what we've been through. We were hit by a pandemic that upended normal life. Who would have thought that the government would ever tell us how many times a day we could leave our homes? Then, just as we were recovering from COVID, war returned to Europe, with Putin's invasion of Ukraine sending your energy bills spiraling. I came to office, above all, to restore economic stability.
This is true, and now Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street less than 2 years ago, revealing sort of his government and pitching himself as this sort of anchor of stability. The whole pitch for security, the world is in peril, The Conservatives, Rishi Sunak, are stable. Labour, they're an unknown quantity. This is going to be the Conservative election pitch. You can expect to hear this again and again and again. It sort of calls back to Sunak's speech last week, where he talked about nuclear war. He talked about immigration. He talked about the sort of war in the Middle East, war on the continent. Theo, security, is that the pitch? Is that what we're going to hear for the next 6 weeks or so?
It's a real shame, but I think so. He's appealing to the most, I suppose, low common denominator conservative message. The barbarians are at the gate. I'm the beacon of stability. Labour has no plan. Labour hasn't sealed the deal. China, Hamas, Russia, they're upon us. Any day now they're going to be here, and I'm the one to defend it.
The SNP and China are at the gate, because he grouped the SNP in with all of them last week. He was like, Scottish nationalists, Hamas, China. He did a long list of it, which the SNP took exception to.
Well, nationalist, I suppose it has that kind of connotation. I always notice Boris Johnson going out of his way to call the SNP the Scottish nationalists in the Commons. Did you remember that?
Yeah, he kept doing it, and they kept sort of yelling at him every time he did it. I remember it well.
Yeah.
The days
Very
of
misleading.
The days of Ian Blackford, eh?
Oh my God, yeah. He did take Johnson to task, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think again, I suppose the strategy is he's painting this picture that we've achieved economic stability. I mean, anyone with a memory that goes back more than 2 months will remember that the message then was, we're on our way to economic stability. We're going to get there. We just need to sit tight and make sacrifices. And now apparently we've achieved economic stability, even though the improvements have been very marginal, as we discussed on our deep analysis of the economic situation at the moment. So I suppose just kind of twisting the narratives there. But that's his strat. It's, I've created stability, apparently. Things have been difficult. Everything that went wrong isn't my fault. But you can trust me, and you can't trust Labour. And I don't even know what their pledges are. And to be fair, I'm sure most people don't know what Labour's pledges are, but I think that's completely irrelevant to the decision that millions, an almost unprecedented amount, not as many as 97, I don't think, but a lot of people will make on July the 4th to vote for Labour and kick the Tories out.
See, this is the interesting thing. And obviously we had the inflation figures today, etc., and we've seen some data indicating economic confidence is going up a bit. Voters are acknowledging the economy is improving. Here's the thing. Ipsos polling at the beginning of this week showed more people now than at any point throughout the whole parliament think it's time for a change. Voters are not yet giving the government credit for any economic improvement. And Rishi Sunak has called an election, 6 months earlier than he needed to. In those 6 months, maybe nothing changed, but maybe they did get a little bump and the defeat was smaller. Maybe the sort of economic optimism would filter through a bit. There's no time for that now. It's not going to happen in 6 weeks, which is what makes the economy pitch puzzling to me. Anyway, we'll hear a bit more from Sunak here.
Economic stability is the bedrock of any future success. Whether that is rising wages and good jobs, investment in our public services, or the defence of the country. And because of our collective sacrifice and your hard work, we have reached 2 major milestones in delivering that stability, showing that when we work together, anything is possible. Our economy is now growing faster than anyone predicted.
I'm going to cut it off there because we'll get copyrighted for Things Can Only Get Better playing in the background. What did you make of that, Theo? I thought that was absolutely surreal.
I didn't actually know what it was. I didn't get the significance of it. I imagined it was something that was supposed to kind of highlight the seminality of the moment. Apparently, it was like a rallying cry for Tony Blair in '97 or something.
Yeah, it's and when voters were asked, it still has public resonance because in a poll, when voters were asked what song they think Keir Starmer would play after winning a general election, they played "Things Can Only Get Better."
Oh my God!
So voters still remember.
I was waiting for I was surprised how long it took. I'm guessing the police to shut it off.
Yeah, but no, it went on.
Embarrassing. He's getting rained on, and you can barely hear him talk.
He is soaked. Listen, Tory MPs are in meltdown tonight. There was talk of a vote of no confidence to stop him calling the election. There was talk of just he's given up, he's done. This is a nightmare. Loads of Tory MPs tonight tweeting, saying, I'm tearful. I can't believe I don't get to sort of get some time to get ready to leave. You're probably going to see in the next couple of weeks a rush of Tories announcing their resignations because they thought they'd have weeks to announce they were retiring, and they don't. They literally have a week. It's not a good start. I mean, this isn't, again, and looking at the polling right now, the Conservatives are polling 21 points behind Labour. They are on 23% of the vote. That is, count them, 8 points lower than they were in 1997. What's going, like, is there any rationale for calling the election, Theo? Or do you think is it genuinely, it's one of two things, in my opinion. Either Sunak has given up and he wants to go to California, or it's like a moment of principle. And he's like, I know it's terrible, but it's the right thing for the country to go now. I mean, what do you buy? What do you think's going through his mind today?
Well, you may have remembered a few times I kind of posited the theory that it's now down to Sunak's psychology. Nothing outside of a major black swan event could really shift fortunes in the country and shift the electoral outcome significantly. I think it's a mix of he broke, it finally got to him, he gave up, and obviously presented it as the morally right thing to do. And the morally right thing to do would have been have the election 29 episodes ago when we started speculating about when it would be.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and of course, I mean, there's no wonder there's frenzy in the Tory party. I mean, they've been given, if you count, I mean, it's a 6 weeks notice, but if you count the fact that they'll be campaigning or whatever, and for the most of it, it's a de facto 1 week notice, you know? I mean, you know, out of jobs, not coming back into Parliament. So I can understand, and there's a big, obviously, grift between him and his party, evidently. And I highly doubt there'll be a successful leadership bid to stop the election. I mean, that's the kind of thing people in a kind of frenetic state will say at a moment like this, you know?
Do you know what it is? It's the bargaining stage, isn't it, of grief. They're like, there must be, this isn't happening. We're not about to all lose our seats. This isn't going on.
Yeah. The acceptance will hit very quickly, but I'd say right now we're like kind of post-denial.
Yeah, they almost don't believe it's happening. I mean, it is. I didn't believe it was happening until he said it. And even then, it took me a second to be like, am I on something? Have I been poisoned? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I don't worship politicians as any more sane than the average person. There's a good chance a lot of Tory MPs did kind of fall under the fallacy that something would happen that would then allow Sunak to, at that time, call an election and have better chances. And this is, I suppose, maybe perhaps the reality just kicking in. No, nothing can save you now. This is really going to happen.
And there's no way back. This was Sir Keir Starmer reacting to the calling of the general election. 2 flags on either side of him, as you'd expect.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for, and where, by the force of our democracy, power returns to you. A chance to change for the better your future, your community, your country. Now, it will feel like a long campaign, I'm sure of that. But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about. Over the course of the last 4 years, we've changed the Labour Party, returned it once more to the service of working people. All we ask now, humbly, is to do exactly the same for our country and return Britain to the service of working people.
Theo, is this definitely the next Prime Minister? Is it done?
It's done.
It's done.
It's done. And you know how I know that from polling figures. I know that from 29 episodes of essentially baking this belief in. I know that from reading the polls all this time and seeing them essentially stagnant with the Tories at record low numbers. But if you look at his speech, what's he really appealing to? It's not a give me your vote speech. It's a, hey, I'm coming to be your Prime Minister speech. I mean, it's a kind of very broad appeal. He's not talking about anything specific like defense, like Sunak was talking about. It's just a total overhaul, complete change, new government, nothing he feels he really needs to say, no policy issues he feels he really needs to highlight to win people over.
Hey, public, you better get used to me because I'm coming. It's basically the message, isn't it? I am safe, I am stable, I'm not going to rock the boat, and by the way, I'm not Rishi Sunak.
Strong and stable.
Strong and stable. Who do you think? My take on this has changed over time. Initially, sort of, when Rishi Sunak became Conservative leader, I would maybe have said Starmer was more of a liability in the election campaign. Sunak, has a reputation as a relatively smooth operator. Now my view is Starmer seems to be improving on the stump. Sunak has always been wooden when he appears in public. I think Sunak is more vulnerable to sort of a Theresa May moment. What do you make of it, Theo? Who could blow this for themselves by coming across terribly in public?
Absolutely Sunak. Starmer has definitely eased into the role. I mean, he was already a kind of high-profile public figure, but in terms of being the figurehead, the spearhead of the party, that's something he had to ease into, and you've seen that in his rhetoric. It's really evolved. Sunak, from day one until now, hasn't changed. I literally remember the first meme of Sunak I saw was his acceptance speech, and it just was literally Will from the In-Betweeners. Literally
to
the same.
our country.
Yeah, exactly. He's still Will from the In-Betweeners. So, yeah. And look, I mean,
that's an indictment, Theo.
No, he's so wooden, and the problem is when you combine that wooden attitude with the common knowledge that he's exceptionally rich, and he's a Tory, and he's kind of seen as very incompetent. It does not create I'd say Starmer arguably potentially may even be able to create a man of the people image, but Sunak obviously is the opposite, not just not a man of the people, a complete kind of out of touch elitist, extremely awkward, very wooden, as you say.
And look, it's time for a change is going to be Labour's message. I think, personally, the more important thing in what Labour does is not what does Starmer need to do to seal the deal. Starmer's sealed the deal, okay? He's going to win. Labour are going to win by virtue of the unpopularity of the Conservatives. It would be unprecedented for a Prime Minister, party leader, government this unpopular to win re-election in 6 weeks. Listen, as lads, Sunak bros, tech bros, as close to being over as it is possible to be. It is far more over than it was for Labour at the start of the 2019 campaign. The Conservative path back is going to be at least 2 or 3 times harder than the Labour path to beating Boris Johnson in 2019. The Labour landslide lead, their lead on the economy, their lead on economic competence, their lead on leadership, their lead on national security, it's just without precedent. It's huge. So in that sense, it's pretty much done. I think the important thing about what Starmer does isn't how he seals the deal. It's what it signals about his priorities, because what Keir Starmer says in the next 6 weeks will define the opening agenda of a Labour Prime Minister, the first Labour Prime Minister since 2010, the first Labour election winner that wasn't called Tony Blair since 1974. This is a new Labour government potentially coming into office in about 40 days from right now. What Starmer says between now and then will signal his priorities, because to be honest, Theo, we still don't know much, do we?
No, there's very little idea of how he'll act in his first days in office or what his exactly first move will be. Again, like I said, his agenda is just massive change.
That's it. And that is, I mean, I think in terms of this podcast, it's probably worth giving people a little bit of an idea. We're almost certainly doing live election coverage on election night, right? That is almost certainly, would you say, we're probably about 90% chance we'll be doing live election coverage on this podcast, on this channel, right, Theo? On election night.
Yes, we're going to make it an event. We're going to be competing with the mainstream legacy media. We'll have a live show. We'll have cameras. We'll have interesting guests, appearances, everything. I think it'll be
Theo's
great.
house, is that the plan? I think. At Sonny's house, even, not Theo's house.
Yes, yeah, I think Sonny's house. And I don't know. I would say Westminster, but I actually think Westminster will be kind of dead during the election.
Yeah, no one will be there. But maybe a few days after, first Labour Queen's speech, King's speech.
I think stay opening a parliament, we should definitely be there.
Oh, 100%. By the way, I'm on holiday the last week of this election. I get in on election day, so I'm going to jet into the country from the Canary Islands. By the way, don't worry, I'll be doing this pod from abroad. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be jetting in from the Canary Islands and then hot-futting it down to London to meet you guys on election day itself. That is going to be my plan for July the 4th.
That is just the glamorous life of a high-end podcast host.
Really is. I need to wear a suit. I'll put on a suit in the Canary Islands, and then I'll arrive in London in a suit. It'll be amazing. It'll be incredible.
We'll see Sunak on the plane out. Bye, guys.
What, he's like, that's it, guys. Yeah. Wow.
I'm conceding defeat
Guys,
from Silicon Valley.
He doesn't turn up to his constituency count in Richmond. Do you know what I find
To be
funny?
fair, if he sent a waxwork, you would not know the difference.
He went on Loose Women this week and told them not to cancel summer holidays. There won't be a summer election. I just find it funny. He went on and just lied to the Loose Women for no reason. Why did he do that?
To be fair, he may have literally changed his mind since then.
Well, it seems a bit weird. It felt like a fever dream today with like I don't know about where you are, but it was grey, it was raining, it seemed quite apocalyptic. There were rumours of an election. It was all a bit sinister. I was like, what's going on?
I know those kinds of days in London, but where I am, it's 23 degrees clear.
Oh, you bugger. Right. So you're you're okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll wait and see what's going to happen, I think. Lots more podcasts on here, is it? Are we expecting more regular uploads, would you say, Theo?
Yeah, I suppose maybe switch to a new format where we just cover events as they happen, because I suppose there'll be lots of sporadic, interesting things to cover.
Obviously, we haven't discussed this in a meeting yet, but I think the sort of Sunday, Monday uploads are done now, and we're just going to do them as regularly as needed, would be my thought.
Yeah, those were the pre-election period podcasts where we just had to kind of churn through things every week, and often we had very little to talk about. But we're now at a point where we can upload several times a week, maybe share the burden, and definitely always have very interesting stuff to talk about and potentially get a lot more people listening in that time.
Yep, that's the plan. We're in the Wild West now, folks. Hey, there could be a podcast tomorrow. Maybe it'll be at the weekend. Maybe it'll be next week. We'll probably have something to say before next week.
And remember that a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about potentially another 9 months of doing this election. That's over. It's happening now. We can breathe. The real stuff begins now.
I've never felt more alive, Theo. Don't you think? We've been building up this podcast. We finally actually have a purpose. Like, this is actually happening now.
Putting in the work. We've been making the algorithm love us. We've been stroking it. And it's...
Okay.
It's been
okay, Theo. Okay. I know general election fever gets to us all. I was putting some weird stuff in the group chat earlier, wasn't I? I really was.
Yes. Okay. Let's read Toby's highlight reel.
No, let's not. Let's not. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's my honour on behalf of the team here at Political Paradigms. Me and Sonny and Theo will be with you right through this massive 6 weeks, seismic 6 weeks in British politics. It's my pleasure to welcome you officially to Campaign 2024. Thanks for listening, and we'll be with you again soon.